Welcome back to the channel. Today we have something truly chilling for you. We're diving deep into the echoing tunnels and desolate stretches of track where fear takes the express route. Get ready to hear 3 true, scary train horror stories that will make you think twice before your next train ride. Buckle up, turn down the lights, and prepare to be transported into a world of terror. Imagine this. The clock ticks past midnight, casting long, eerie shadows across the near-empty train platform, the silence almost deafening. Our first story takes us to a desolate station in rural Japan, where a young woman named Hana waits for the last train home, her breath visible in the cold night air. The air is thick with the silence of the approaching night, broken only by the distant rumble of an arriving train, its headlights piercing through the darkness. Hana, exhausted from a long day at work, huddles deeper into her coat, the chill seeping through her gloves and biting at her skin. The train screeches to a halt, its brakes hissing like a startled beast, the sound echoing through the empty station. The doors slide open, revealing a carriage bathed in dim, flickering fluorescent light. It's eerily empty, as if abandoned. Hesitantly, Hana steps inside, her footsteps echoing in the silence, each step amplifying her sense of isolation. She chooses a seat near the middle, clutching her bag close, seeking some semblance of comfort. As the train lurches forward, picking up speed, she can't shake the feeling of being watched, a prickling sensation crawling up her spine. The hairs on the back of her neck prickle with unease, a physical manifestation of her growing fear. The rhythmic clatter of the train wheels against the tracks becomes a hypnotic soundtrack to her mounting anxiety, each clack a reminder of her solitude. She tries to distract herself with her phone, but the battery icon blinks red, a dying ember of light in the encroaching darkness, leaving her more isolated. She glances at her reflection in the window, startled by her own wide, frightened eyes staring back at her. Suddenly, a movement at the edge of her vision makes her jump, her heart racing. In the reflection, she sees a figure standing in the aisle behind her, unmoving and silent. A tall, shadowy figure, its face obscured by the darkness, adding to the sense of dread. Her heart pounds in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears, a drumbeat of terror. Slowly, she turns her head, bracing herself for the worst, her breath caught in her throat. But the aisle is empty, devoid of any presence. She lets out a shaky breath, trying to rationalize the experience, telling herself it was just a trick of the light, a figment of her tired imagination playing tricks. She tries to go back to her thoughts, but the uneasy feeling persists, clinging to her like the cold air in the carriage, refusing to let go. Just as she starts to relax, she hears it, a sound that sends chills down her spine. A soft, raspy whisper coming from the seat behind her, barely audible yet unmistakable. It's so quiet she almost doubts she heard it at all, questioning her own senses. But it sends a fresh wave of terror through her body tensing in response. She can't bring herself to turn around, paralyzed by fear, her muscles locked in place. The voice speaks again, closer this time, a chilling whisper that sends shivers down her spine. "You shouldn't be here." Hana's blood runs cold, her mind racing with fear. Our next journey takes us to the American Heartland, where a seasoned train conductor named Cal found himself facing a terror he could never have imagined. Cal, a man who navigated the steel veins of the country with unwavering certainty, found his resolve shaken to the core one moonless night. It was a desolate stretch of track, miles from any town or station, the only sound the rhythmic chug of the engine and the mournful cry of the wind whistling through the gaps in the windows. Cal, making his rounds, checking on passengers and ensuring the smooth running of the train, felt a sudden chill despite the warmth of his cabin. He glanced out the window into the impenetrable darkness, his breath fogging the glass. And that's when he saw it. A figure standing on the tracks ahead, illuminated briefly by the train's headlight. It was a man, dressed in what appeared to be an old, tattered conductor's uniform, his face obscured by the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. Cal's heart lurched. There shouldn't be anyone out here, miles from civilization. He grabbed the train's horn, blasting a warning into the night. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, an eerie silhouette against the darkness, its feet seemingly planted on the tracks. Cal slammed on the brakes, the train screeching to a halt, the sudden deceleration sending a jolt through the carriages. He rushed to the front of the train, his heart pounding in his chest, a mixture of fear and adrenaline coursing through him. He peered out into the darkness, but the figure was gone, vanished without a trace. Cal, his breath catching in his throat, scanned the tracks, his eyes straining in the darkness. There was nowhere for anyone to hide, no way anyone could have moved so fast. He returned to the cabin, shaken but determined to rationalize the experience. He told himself it was just a trick of the light, a figment of his imagination playing tricks on him in the dead of night. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. The next night, on the same route, at the same desolate stretch of track, Cal saw the figure again. This time, it was closer, its features slightly clearer in the flickering light of the train's approach. The ghostly conductor stood there, his hand raised as if signaling the train to stop. Cal felt a chill run down his spine, a primal fear gripping him. He blew the horn again, but the figure remained, its hand outstretched, its eyes, though hidden by the shadows of the hat, seeming to bore into Cal's very soul. Cal didn't stop this time. He couldn't. Something about the figure filled him with an overwhelming sense of dread, a feeling that to stop would be to invite unimaginable terror into his life. He held his breath as the train roared past the figure, the ghostly conductor's form flickering in and out of view in the train's lights. He glanced back, his heart still pounding in his chest, but the figure was gone. Night after night, the ghostly conductor appeared on the tracks, always in the same spot, always with the same outstretched hand, the same chilling presence. Word spread among the other conductors, tales of the phantom figure haunting the late-night route. The legend of the ghostly conductor grew, becoming a part of the folklore of the railway. Some said he was a conductor who had died tragically on those very tracks, forever bound to the rails he once served. Others believed he was a harbinger, a warning of danger ahead. But for Cal, the ghostly figure was a nightly reminder of the unknown, a chilling presence that turned his routine journey into a passage through the supernatural. Our final journey takes us to the bustling heart of London, where a group of friends on a late-night train ride found themselves trapped in a terrifying game of cat and mouse with a shadowy entity that seemed to defy explanation. This eerie encounter would leave them questioning the very nature of reality. The friends, Alex, Ben, Sarah, and Emily, were returning from a concert, their spirits high, the music still ringing in their ears. They were in high spirits, reminiscing about the night's events and the electrifying performance they had just witnessed. They joked and laughed, their voices echoing in the mostly empty train carriage, the rhythmic clatter of the train wheels providing a steady beat to their carefree conversation. The camaraderie and joy they shared seemed to fill the space with warmth and light. As the train plunged into a particularly long tunnel, the lights flickered and dimmed, casting the carriage into an unsettling gloom. The sudden change in atmosphere was jarring, like a switch had been flipped. The laughter died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. The friends exchanged nervous glances, the jovial mood evaporating in an instant. It was then that Alex noticed it. A chill ran down his spine as his eyes locked onto the figure. A figure shrouded in shadows, sitting at the far end of the carriage. It was almost as if it had materialized out of the darkness itself. It wasn't the darkness that made it unsettling, but the way it seemed to absorb the little light that remained, its edges blurring, its form shifting like smoke. The figure seemed to defy the very laws of physics. He nudged Ben, his eyes darting between the figure and his friend. His heart pounded in his chest. "Do you see that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the rumbling of the train. His words were laced with a mix of fear and curiosity. Ben squinted, his brow furrowed. "What? See what?" He strained his eyes, trying to pierce the gloom. "That figure at the end of the carriage," Alex hissed, his voice tight with apprehension. He pointed discreetly, not wanting to draw attention. Ben turned to look, his gaze lingering on the shadowy form. His eyes widened as he finally saw it. A shiver ran down his spine. The air around them seemed to grow colder. There was something undeniably unnerving about the way it sat, motionless, its presence radiating an aura of wrongness that sent a prickle of fear crawling up his back. It was as if the figure was watching them, waiting. He tried to laugh it off. The sound was hollow, lacking any real mirth. "Probably just another late-night passenger. You're imagining things, mate." He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The figure's presence gnawed at the edges of his mind. The figure seemed to exude a coldness that seeped into the very air of the carriage, chilling them to the bone. It was a cold that felt almost supernatural. Sarah, sensing their unease, leaned in. Her eyes were filled with concern. "What are you two whispering about?" Her voice was soft but insistent. "Nothing," Ben said quickly, trying to sound casual. He didn't want to alarm her, just admiring the lovely view. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She knew something was wrong. She could sense their apprehension, the way their eyes kept darting back to the figure at the end of the carriage. Her curiosity piqued. She turned to look. She followed their gaze, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the shadowy form. Her heart skipped a beat. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Fear tinged her words. Emily, who had been lost in her own thoughts, finally tuned in. "What is what?" She looked around, confused. "That," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. She pointed towards the end of the carriage. At the end of the carriage. Her hand shook as she gestured. Emily turned to look, her eyes widening as they landed on the figure. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A wave of fear washed over her, cold and suffocating. It felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. It felt like a physical presence, a darkness that had seeped into the carriage, wrapping itself around them like a shroud. The air grew thick with tension. As the train emerged from the tunnel, the lights flickered back to life, bathing the carriage in a wave of reassuring brightness. The sudden return of light was almost blinding, but the figure was gone, vanished without a trace. It was as if it had never been there. They searched the carriage, their eyes scanning every corner, every seat, every shadow. But there was nothing. The figure had disappeared, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more chilling tales. The next time you find yourself on a late-night train, remember the stories you've heard tonight. The whispers in the darkness, the shadows that flicker at the edge of your vision, and the chilling reminder that sometimes the scariest things are closer than you think. Sweet dreams.